All right, so get ready because today we're going to dive into something pretty wild. President Trump's proposal for Gaza.
Oh, yeah, this one.
The one that's got everyone talking from world leaders to, late night comedians buzzing about it.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to unpack here.
We do.
News articles, analyses, I think even some leaked whispers in here.
Oh, wow.
And frankly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole thing.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But that's what we're here for, right? We're going to break down what exactly is at the core of this plan, what Trump thinks he's trying to achieve, and then, what could the fallout be? What are the potential consequences for everybody involved?
For everyone involved, exactly.
Exactly.
And I think right off the bat, what strikes me is how this isn't, your typical policy tweak.
Right.
Trump's basically talking about, hitting the reset button on the entire region.
It's not every day you hear a sitting president float the idea that the U.S. is just going to take over another territory.
No, it's not.
So this Gaza Riviera plan, where do we even begin?
Well, the core idea seems to be that the United States takes control of Gaza, like boots on the ground, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
But it goes way beyond just military control.
Okay.
He's talking about what he calls an ownership position.
Hold up. Ownership position.
Yeah.
That sounds more like real estate than foreign policy.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this so fascinating.
Okay.
Is that Trump's background in real estate seems to be shaping his entire approach to this. He's looking at Gaza as a blank slate, like a development opportunity.
Wow.
He even wants to relocate the entire Palestinian population.
Oh, wow.
Which is roughly 2 million people to neighboring countries, and completely rebuild the area, turning it into this thing that he calls the Riviera of the Middle East.
So if I'm following correctly, his vision is basically to just clear everybody out, bulldoze everything, start fresh. Like he's picturing luxury condos and beach resorts where there are currently homes and communities.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And he seems genuinely convinced that the Palestinians would be happy with this arrangement. He's argued that they're living in hell right now and would be thrilled to be relocated to a new modern development.
I mean, I can see how that logic might appeal to a developer's mindset.
Yeah.
But it just completely disregards the Palestinians' connection to their land, their history, and, just their right to self-determination. It's as if he's saying, we know what's best for you, so pack your bags.
Exactly. And that brings us to the international reaction, which has been, shall we say, less than enthusiastic.
To put it mildly, we've got articles here talking about shockwaves and fury from the Arab world.
Right.
It seems like everyone from Egypt and Jordan to Saudi Arabia is vehemently opposed to accepting relocated Palestinians.
And they're not just saying no thanks either.
Oh.
They're warning that this could destabilize the entire region.
Right.
Imagine a sudden influx of 2 million people into countries that are already strained.
Yeah.
There are concerns about potential economic and social upheaval, not to mention the possibility of escalating tensions with Israel.
There's also this quote from a Saudi official warning that Trump's remarks could completely derail any future diplomatic ties with Israel.
Wow.
And that's huge, considering Saudi Arabia has been such a key player in pushing for normalization with Israel.
Right. It seems like this plan could be a major setback for those efforts.
Yeah.
And even Israel's ambassador to the UN, while supportive of the U.S. taking control of Gaza, has insisted that any relocation would require the consent of the Palestinians and the countries that would be receiving them.
Which completely contradicts Trump's assumption that everyone's just going to fall in line with his vision.
Right.
This whole idea of forced relocation, it just feels deeply unsettling.
It does.
Like it's something out of a history book.
Yeah.
A dark chapter we'd rather forget.
Yeah.
And the comparison to historical instances of forced displacement and ethnic cleansing being made by some commentators is definitely cause for concern.
It is. Yeah, it really makes you think about, the dangers of looking at something like this that's so complex through a purely transactional lens. You can't just treat people and their land like they're pieces on a chessboard and just move them around to suit your own, grand strategy.
And it's not like this is happening in a vacuum either.
No.
We've also got this whole other layer of domestic politics happening here. Netanyahu over in Israel, he seems to be really using the situation to his advantage.
Oh, absolutely. He's under a lot of pressure back home.
Yeah.
His right-wing coalition partners are pushing for a hardline stance on the Palestinians. And then you have the Israeli public who are, by and large, just weary of this seemingly endless conflict.
Right, so it just keeps going and going.
Exactly. And then along comes Trump with this very radical proposal, and all of a sudden Netanyahu has this golden opportunity.
So it's like a gift.
Think about it.
Yeah.
He can now present himself as this strong leader
Right.
who's secured the backing of the most powerful nation on earth.
Right.
He can say, look, Trump is on our side. He understands our security concerns. He's willing to take bold action.
And it's music to the ears of the far right in Israel. I mean, we've got quotes in here from some pretty extreme figures praising Trump and Netanyahu, talking about this, beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Wow.
It's a little chilling, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. It makes you think about the unintended consequences of moves like these.
Right.
When you empower the people that are already inclined towards extremism, you just risk creating a more volatile and dangerous situation.
Definitely. And what about the legal side of all of this? Can Trump even legally do this? Can he just seize a foreign territory like this?
It's a huge gray area, to say the least. There's some very serious legal questions about whether a president has the authority to do something like this without congressional approval.
So Congress would have to be on board.
It seems so.
Okay.
And even if he could pull it off legally, it would be a complete departure from decades of U.S. foreign policy principles.
Right. I mean, not to mention just the sheer logistical nightmare of relocating 2 million people. Where would they go? How would they be resettled? What about their livelihoods, their cultural heritage? It's like all these questions have been completely overlooked.
Yeah, it's a classic case of focusing on the big picture without thinking about the practical realities or even the human cost.
Yeah.
And, the irony is this plan, which is supposedly aimed at bringing peace and stability, could actually achieve the opposite.
It's like throwing a lit match into a powder keg.
Yeah.
Like you're alienating key allies, you're emboldening extremists, and you're violating international law. How does any of that lead to a peaceful resolution?
It doesn't. And that's why this whole thing feels so reckless and dangerous. It's like this short-sighted solution that fails to grasp the real complexities of the situation.
Yeah.
It's driven by a desire for quick fixes, bold pronouncements that are going to grab headlines rather than a nuanced understanding of the historical and political realities.
So where does this all leave us? We have a plan that has been met with international condemnation, legal challenges, and ethical concerns. A plan that's highly unlikely to ever be implemented.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's without consequences.
Exactly. The very fact that it's been proposed, that it's been given a platform by the President of the United States, has shifted the conversation.
Yeah.
It's emboldened certain actors while further marginalizing others.
Right.
It's just injected this dangerous dose of uncertainty into a region that's already incredibly volatile.
And it keeps coming back to this question in my mind.
Yeah.
Is this a temporary aberration? Like, is this just a product of having a uniquely unconventional president?
Right.
Or are we actually witnessing a deeper shift in U.S. foreign policy?
Yeah.
Like a move away from diplomacy and multilateralism towards a more unilateral transactional approach?
It's a crucial question. And to be honest with you, I don't have a definitive answer.
Yeah.
But what I will say is this.
Yeah.
The decisions that are being made today, both in Washington and on the world stage, they will have lasting consequences. We're talking about shaping the geopolitical landscape for generations to come.
And it's not just the international stage that's seeing these dramatic shifts. Back here at home, things are getting pretty wild as well. While the world is focused on this Gaza situation, there's another story unfolding in the U.S., a story of political turmoil, controversial appointments, and a government that just seems to be constantly on the brink of chaos.
Yeah, it's like we're watching two parallel universes collide here.
I know, right?
On one side, you have this huge international controversy brewing over this whole Gaza thing. And on the other side, you have what's happening here domestically, and it's becoming increasingly unpredictable.
Yeah, it's almost as if Trump's, willingness to throw out the rule book when it comes to international affairs is kind of emboldening him to do the same thing back home.
Well, you know what they say? If it ain't broke, break it.
Right.
And that seems to be the motto of his second term.
It does.
We've got these reports about Elon Musk essentially being given free rein to streamline government agencies. Streamline is one way to put it.
Yeah.
Some might say dismantle.
Oh, yeah.
This whole DOGE project of his, recruiting all these tech-savvy youngsters to find inefficiencies and cut costs. It sounds more like a Silicon Valley startup than like an actual government initiative.
And it's not just about efficiency.
No.
We've heard some whispers about Musk pushing for some pretty radical changes.
Oh, really?
Like merging entire departments and even privatizing some government functions.
Wow. That brings up the question of what happens to accountability and oversight.
Right, exactly.
In that kind of scenario.
They're like, who's really in charge?
You're essentially just handing over control of essential services to a group of people that weren't elected and that have a very specific, arguably narrow worldview.
Yeah, and it's not just Musk either. We've got this whole thing with RFK Jr.'s nomination causing a stir.
Oh, yeah.
Both sides of the aisle seem to be concerned about his past statements and even, his qualifications for the role.
It's definitely becoming a pattern with this administration.
Yeah.
This preference for loyalty over expertise.
Right.
A complete disregard for traditional norms and qualifications.
Yeah, and it just creates this atmosphere of constant uncertainty.
It does.
Not just for the people working in these institutions, but also for the public.
Right, like think about it.
Yeah.
If you can't trust the people who are running this show to make good decisions,
right,
to act in the best interests of the country, it just erodes trust in the entire system.
Yeah.
And that's a very slippery slope.
Definitely. So if we just take a step back and look at the bigger picture here, it's a pretty unsettling scene, right?
Yeah, it is.
We have a president making radical moves on both the international and domestic fronts. We have a government that seems to be lurching from one crisis to the next.
Yeah.
And a public that seems increasingly divided and disillusioned.
It really makes you wonder, where does this all lead?
Right.
Is this just a new normal?
Like, is this just how things are now?
A state of perpetual disruption and upheaval?
Yeah.
Or is there a tipping point somewhere?
Right.
A moment where the system just can't handle the pressure anymore?
These are questions we can't really answer today.
No.
But they're questions that we as engaged citizens need to be asking ourselves.
You do.
Because as we've seen with this whole Gaza situation, the stakes are incredibly high.
They are. We're not just talking about policy decisions. We're talking about shaping the future.
Yeah.
The actions that are being taken today, both in Washington and around the world, will have ripple effects for generations to come.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means staying informed.
Yes.
It means engaging in critical thinking, and it means demanding accountability from our leaders.
Absolutely. It means questioning assumptions, challenging narratives, and seeking out diverse perspectives.
Because in a world that's becoming increasingly complex and interconnected, we can't afford to just be passive observers.
Right, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Exactly.
And it all starts with understanding the present.
And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final and slightly unsettling thought.
Oh.
Could this whole Gaza Riviera plan, as outlandish as it might sound, actually be a distraction tactic? A way to divert attention away from other potentially more radical things happening somewhere else?
It's a question worth pondering. For sure.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that in the world of geopolitics, things are rarely as they appear on the surface.
Right.
There are always layers of complexity, hidden agendas, and you always have to think about the unintended consequences.
Exactly. So keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper, and keep the conversation going, because that's how we're going to make sense of this crazy, complex world and hopefully find a path to a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.